Hey guys, this is Amy, and today we're speaking about the setup for Moebius play. Now, before I begin, I have to say this is all based on preference and opinion, so you don't have to follow these tips. You can figure things out on your own, but I highly suggest you listen to these. So to begin here, I'm going to say that I have a few yoyos with me, all right here in my hand. I have a freehand 2, Duncan Mayhem, Duncan Diversion, and a Yo-Yo Factory Protostar. Mayhem and freehand 2, they're both small bearing. Diversion and Protostar, they're a large bearing. So the first thing we need to speak about is shape. When it comes to shape, I highly suggest using yoyos that are organic or classic butterfly shape. The reason why I say this is it seems as if that when you're doing technical string tricks with Moebius, that it's easier to go through all the different segments with it instead of, say, a yo-yo that is shaped like a Protostar. Due to how the Protostar is so wide and it's got all these high angles to it, it's kind of difficult to go through all the technical stuff. You can do simple Moebius with it, like, like with the Diversion, how it's flat rimmed, or the Protostar, which is super wide and has these high angles. You're able to do Moebius with it, but it's just a lot more difficult. So I highly suggest just using a yo-yo that's considered organic shape, like Duncan Mayhem. Next thing to say about bearing choice. Bearing choice is very important when it comes to Moebius play. I highly suggest to beginners to use large bearing yo-yos. Not only large bearing yo-yos, but yo-yos with either a pad recess or a silicone groove. The reason why I say this is due to the number one important thing, the gap. Large bearing yo-yos have a large gap. You need to have a large gap for Moebius so that when you're playing Moebius and the slipknot loop, see, I'll show you. Here's an example. I did not mount it right. Here. Let me show you again. Alright, so pretend I'm doing Moebius. Pretend the yo-yo is spinning. Obviously it's not. If this little part of the knot of the slipknot loop, if it goes into the gap, if you have a large gap / large bearing yo-yo, it's not going to bind back up. Reason why is due to large gap. You have more string into the gap. So it's going to allow this knot / slipknot part into the gap, which means it will not bind back up. Highly important. If you're using a small bearing yo-yo, like say a freehand 2, you're able to do simplistic Moebius, but if you get the knot part of it into the gap, it's pretty much going to be impossible. So you can pretty much guarantee that you're not going to be able to do no-handed tricks, or tricks that have it where it's going over that knot part of the slipknot loop. One of the reasons why that, besides small gap, because of small bearing, for example, the freehand 2, is because the response setup for the freehand 2, it's above the yo-yo wall. With that, it's just going to make the yo-yo more responsive. So, when it comes to setup, large bearing yo-yo, either silicone groove or pad recess. My personal preference is pad recess. And also make sure to have a clean bearing so that it's able to do long sleepers and it's unresponsive play. And let's see. Oh, last but not least, string setup. Now, I've been testing different strings when it comes to Moebius over the years, and when it comes to that, you need to have a string that will keep the slack of the string. And what I mean by that is pretty much having the slipknot open and making sure that it doesn't twist up. You need to make sure that that stays completely neutral. So, there's not a lot of string out there that can really do that because you have to control the tension of the string. I stick with original white poly, not highlights, not G-string, just regular poly. You could probably try the different variations of G-string, probably the Slack Suicide Edition. I've tried that, and honestly, it just doesn't not seem to keep the tension of the slipknot loop open. I've tried Slick 6. That's just as bad. I highly suggest not using cotton or Slick 6. The other reason of the string setup is when it comes to the string, here, I'll just use my Duncan Mayhem right here. You need to have a string that's going to also open the slipknot loop open to make it more smooth. See how that is? It's very smooth and opening that up. So, you need to make sure you have a string that will keep the tension, but not only that, be able to open the slipknot loop open a lot more smoothly. So, that's that. Those are 3 basic tips to follow by. So let me just go over them again. Organic shape / butterfly shape. More organic, more rounded yo-yo. Tip 2. Large bearing, either pad resist or silicone groove. And make sure that bearing is clean, or else you're never going to be able to do all of what Moebius is capable of. And 3. String, use just regular poly. However, like I said, these are all preferences. Like I know, for instance, when it comes to me, I use my Duncan Mayhem, which is a small bearing. But the reason why I do that is because I've been kind of, raising the difficulty level of Moebius for me. That's why I use my Duncan Mayhem, but it's pad recessed. Well, those are all the basics tips that I can pretty much say for a setup kind of guide. And that's that. I hope you guys learn this and try to follow through it. And that's it. Later days, guys.